work session of the New Albany Plain Local Board of Education. So with that, I wonder if I could please call the meeting to order and request a roll call.
Mr. Darrow?
Here.
Mrs. Kalinowski?
Here.
Mr. Newmoff?
Here.
Vice President McClelland? And President Kohler?
Yes, and I'm here. So would you all please join us and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are very excited to be holding our first meeting here in our new headquarters, and we are very appreciative to all of those who, under the direction of Mr. Sawyers, have made this space possible. So we are excited about not having to have our meetings moved around like a traveling caravan, and this space is ours. So we'll look forward to many interesting meetings in this new space in the future. So the first order of business is to set our agenda, and I'd like to ask if there are any additions to the agenda this evening or changes. Hearing none, could I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you, and thank you, Mr. Newmoff. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Vice President McClelland?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes,
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
And Mrs. Kalinowski?
Yes.
and that motion carries as well. We, aside from our regular business, which is largely back to school related, we have two discussion items this evening, a report from our superintendent about his 100-day plan, and a second discussion point I think that Mr. Sawyers would like to have with us regarding transportation plans for the coming school year. Mr. Sawyers. Thank you.
Thank you, President Kohler. Good evening, Board of Education members. This evening, we're going to start with an update on the 100-day plan for transition within the school district to the superintendency. I think I'm going to have to go up there. We're going to start with the update for the 100-day plan that you have in front of you. It's also on the screen for the audience members. As President Kohler indicated, this is a new location. For audience participants, there will be two monitors behind the Board of Education that will allow you to see the same presentation that's going to be facing the Board of Education. That should be in place by our next meeting on July 25th. So we recycled those monitors from a different part of the school district and found a new use for them here for the Board of Education. So they will be installed by the end of the month.
Wait, how are we using those?
The audience members will see that, so they don't have to turn to see this.
Ah.
So the board faces the screen, audience will see behind you.
It's like a concert. There'll be our faces will be.
That's what I was afraid of.
That way they can continually look at the Board of Education and check the monitor out at the same time, but never have to lose sight of you. So
I don't know if that's necessary.
it'll save them from getting, a crooked neck. So
Whiplash.
it's gonna help them, whiplash. So we're going to start with the update for the 100-day transition. Dr. Dominique's last day in the school district officially in the office was last Friday. She's now on vacation for the month of July. She worked a couple days at home this week on her evaluation that I know you're meeting on this evening in executive session. But we've started the official transition out of the office. So April and I have had some text message communications this week, as well as a couple phone calls on a variety of topics. But transition's been really, really smooth. We continue to work through the 100-day plan. So Dr. Dominique is now officially on vacation after tonight when she comes to your executive session. Board member discussions and meetings continue throughout the school district. President Kohler and I have had multiple opportunities to talk on the phone, meet face-to-face, as well as I've spoken to every board member in the last week. So we continue to have our conversations. Enrollment conversations continue for changes for 16-17. Most recently, I will just share with you the kindergarten enrollment right now is down about 40 students under the projection of what we had anticipated. So Mr. Emery, Dr. Troyer, and I just met last Friday again to discuss, or Thursday and Friday to discuss kindergarten in the school district and what that will mean for 16-17 related to staffing. Continued meetings with the city, the McCoy, the owners group specifically for the McCoy. As I shared before, we're working on the joint operating agreement that'll be coming forward for additional information to you in the next 2 weeks after I finalize a couple more sections with the township and the city. But the stakeholder group has been meeting specifically on the McCoy agreement for the joint owners. Met with the Community Foundation again and actually partnered with the Rotary. There's a fundraiser that's going to come to the school district most likely in October. We're going back and forth on the date. It's one of 2 dates. So once it's confirmed, we'll let you know. But the Rotary is going to partner with the school district to sponsor a fundraiser to contribute dollars towards the Pay to Participate scholarships within the school district specifically. I'm just going to tell you it's called the Golden Egg Drop, and you'll have to find out what that means when I give you more information. Budget meetings continue for 2016 and 17. We're on track. I will be happy to tell you, even though she's in Cuba this evening, that Ms. Jenkins was successful in actually changing fiscal years. She did it actually on July 1st. This is the first year in the number of years that she's been in the school district that the books actually turned the very next day. She was super excited, but we had a wonderful close to the 2015 or 2016 fiscal year, and we're now in 2017. Discussions for Gifted continue with Dr. Troyer and Mr. Emery as we look towards 16-17. We had shared with you during the Gifted presentation the likelihood of trying to find additional clerical support to offset some of the work being done by the Gifted teachers. We have posted and successfully interviewed and are recommending this evening the half-time secretarial support position specifically to work with curriculum dedicated towards Gifted and other duties as assigned when necessary. Summer maintenance continues. Just as a progress check, I will tell you we're $115,000 into the repair for the middle school boiler system for the underground piping. The 90-degree turns were actually exposed, and we found that they do need significant repair. We're still far under the projection for the maximum cost, but right now, as of this morning, we're at about $115,000 in the repair to date. The 2-5 assistant elementary principal, I'm happy to say that we've gone through the interview and selection process. We will recommend formally this evening on your agenda Mrs. Toma, and I will speak about her when we get to the agenda. Operations Department Administrative Office reorganization for the AO continues. My new administrative assistant actually starts tomorrow. I'm excited that she's going to be in the school district, and she's going to be excited when she sees everything I have planned to give her. Conference calls with PLE and OPSE continue. Dr. Troyer and I have had a successful transition in working with leadership within the OPSE and PLE bargaining units, so that has been very well. Preliminary data analysis, we're doing a Hanover research project related to data in the school district, specifically a correlation between student achievement on the MAP assessment versus state testing. I'll have more information to share with you in the coming weeks. Dr. Dominique tonight in executive session will share with you preliminary results that we've received for raw data from the State Department. So the initial indicators have actually been received by the school district. The data will not be official until September, but she has raw data that she will share with you this evening.
Michael,
Yes.
before you move on, do you want questions held till the end, or you want them as you go?
It's up to you. Which would you prefer?
I have a short memory, so if you don't mind them as you
Fine,
go.
ask me.
On the enrollment review discussion for changes, the minus 40 kids, what's your thinking as to how you might manage 40 fewer kids in the elementary?
Well, it's still a long time between now and August 17th. However, we have instituted a plan for additional math and reading intervention based upon some of the preliminary data results, that there will be targeted intervention provided through math and or reading. Specifically, Mr. Emery's working through that process, but if we end up reducing one teacher minimally, and if not two, to go back to the original 13. We're going from 13 kindergarten to 15 kindergarten. So we'll look at the intervention opportunities that can exist to provide additional supports to at-risk kids based upon the data that was just received. So we will present that information when it becomes more concrete, but that's the path we're heading towards based upon the current numbers within kindergarten.
Okay, and on the middle school boiler, we're 115 in, I think budget was 400, is that
Correct.
right? And where, any thoughts on where you think it's gonna end up, given what you know today?
Hopefully less than 160. So we're going to come in far under budget if everything proceeds as the conversations have had to date. So I'm hoping 160 or less,
Thank you, sir.
which will be a wonderful thing.
$240,000 is real money.
Mhm.
Mr. Sawyer's on enrollment projections. Is that the only blip that you see so far?
Currently, yes. Everything else is pretty stable. We're on target for the projections that we've had. We've gone to the low, not the moderate. So the equal number of students that are enrolling equal the number of students presently that are withdrawing. So we're kind of flatlined. Enrollment as of today for next year was 4,776 students. 4,776 as of today.
Thanks.
Mr. Sawyers, is there any data that would tell us why we are at this point 40 under?
In kindergarten?
Yes.
Not official. Our conversations to date have been, there were several families that did not get all-day K through the lottery that might have pursued another all-day K option once they made the decision they wanted all-day K. Secondly, we believe that there's still a ripple effect from the reductions that took place within the school district, and we're seeing some residual impact of those families that have chosen not to come to the school district to enter kindergarten. And then when you look at the data historically over time, it changes typically with re-enrollment to first grade because we're a half-day program and then you go to all-day first grade. Some families wait to make the transition to first grade for the school district. So we were surprised, but anything can still happen because it's July 11th and we have a month to go.
You sort of answered, I guess, my follow-up question, which was would there be any data that would suggest that if we had a larger program, all-day program, would those numbers be the same or lower?
We actually would anticipate that we would have the demand if we had more availability. It's a space issue currently at the K1. We just physically do not have the physical space historically in the building. Mr. Emery was going to use actually the classroom, for those that have been in the building. The classroom off the library was actually going to become a classroom this fall with the addition of the 2 kindergarten. With the 2 less kindergarten currently being projected, we won't have to put students in non-traditional classrooms that were built in the building. All of the classrooms will be in a real classroom setting. Not that that could not have been used, but it was going to have to be adapted.
Has there also been any thought at all to adding one more all-day K classroom?
It's been
as
a
an
topic of
alternative?
conversation. It comes down to availability and parent interest. Mr. Emery's reviewing that, but quite honestly, based upon some of the data results that have come back, we're targeting specific efforts towards intervention if the availability can be there.
How many families did we turn down that were in that lottery?
Mr. Emery?
Wow.
We're
So,
assessing
but
all
we're-
options.
Thank you. I was just going to say, because we haven't yet had an opportunity to see or review the data, the board isn't operating with full understanding
understand
of the
that.
situation.
I'm glad you didn't say we weren't operating with a full deck.
I thought about it.
Continue to be with Patrick and Beth. Beth is here part-time throughout the summer based upon her availability to transition for communication planning. We have a draft survey related to communications. It was part of the 100-day plan. I will be soliciting questions from the Board of Education related to communication-related items that you would like to ask our parent population or community when we release the survey, but the survey is targeted specifically towards communication and the ability of the school district to communicate effectively with our constituents. So you can begin thinking about that, but it's on my list that you're going to get an email about. Website, social media, and back to school continue. Mrs. Kalinowski and I have been very successful doing PTO prep with PTO leaders. We've had several conversations and meetings with PTO leadership as we plan for 2015-16. I met with Craig Moore again regarding the Jefferson series for programming purposes. And Dr. Troyer and I have participated in conversations specifically to mental health. And we have a meeting with all of the stakeholders tomorrow afternoon at the Heights Center to continue the discussion related to mental health planning for the school district. I've met again with the police chief, the city, and the township officials. We have been successful in purchasing 2 used vehicles, one from the township. It's a dump truck with a plow. Our transmission went out and it would only go in reverse. So the township had a dump truck that they were going to dispose of. That was probably a very, very great deal for us. We paid less than $4,000 and it's worth $21,000. So we came out very well. And the city also sold us a motor vehicle for part of their disposal process that we need for transportation of students with special needs instead of third-party resource. Safety and security, I've met with the first responders. We've updated the emergency operations plan for 2016-17. We've done the resubmission to the Attorney General's office as required under statute for the emergency operations plan. We'll meet with principals the first week of August to continue the training. We've entered into contract negotiations for lease discussions related to Mount Carmel and the half of the administrative office building that Mount Carmel occupies. For the historical perspective, there's joint operating agreements in place related to how the facility was built, originally on the school campus by Mount Carmel. And we enter into, beginning in 2017, the land lease piece where we get to charge Mount Carmel rent for actually occupying the land where the building actually sits for the portion of the square footage they occupy. So I will be sharing more information with you. We've just started the negotiations through the attorney process with Mount Carmel, but I will get you additional information. But the good news is Mount Carmel will begin paying us rent equal to what we pay them. Financial rating meetings have continued. Ms. Jenkins talked about this at the last board meeting for the opportunity to save approximately $2.5 million to the sale of the bonds. Mrs. Kohler participated in the rating meetings last week with Moody's and S&P. We believe they went very well. We should get the information back on or about July 18th to talk about the new ratings before the bonds go to sale at the end of the month. The win-win conversation had a meeting, was productive with Dr. Good in the Columbus City Schools to start the process about the future of the win-win and what it could mean for the New Albany Plain local schools. Each win-win school district is creating their own agreement now with Columbus City with the intent to phase it out over the course of the next 6 years. We have 12 months to come into an agreement, and then there's 5 years thereafter under the current auspice, depending on what we agree to, of what that would mean. By no means does it mean it's anything negative for the families in our school district that live in the win-win community. It's just that this is the future of the win-win and stopping this 6 year, every 6 years wondering what's going to happen. So there will be continued conversations. In August, we will be meeting with Columbus City. President Kohler and Vice President McClellan will be invited to the meeting through the board of the Columbus City Schools, is my understanding from Dr. Good. Survey work continues. I talked a little bit about the communication survey. I've also started a survey with leadership team members for 2016-17 about professional aspirations within the school district, trying to get to some additional background information on the people that I don't have direct contact with on a daily basis historically, so I can learn more about them as we transition leadership in the school district. Tonight, you're going to hear about the significant amount of work that Mrs. Honaker and I have done related to transportation planning for 16-17. So that's a presentation this evening. And believe it or not, I've also managed to take a few vacation days. So, and I have a few more to take before the end of the month. So I will let you know when I'm going to be out of the office, but I have a few more that I need to take. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. Just in terms of adding to the amount of work that you've already accomplished, I wanted to point out to those members of the board who weren't able to join us, but Mr. Sawyers and Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Newmoff and Mrs. Kalinowski and I happily marched in the 4th of July parade. And there are a couple of takeaways for us. One is next year we don't want to be at the very end of the parade. The band was back before we left. And the other thing that we learned, I think, since we are a learning organization, is that you don't throw all your candy out at the first part of the route, because then you're left with no candy for the people who are further along.
And a lot of screaming kids.
Yes. So, no, in all seriousness, I was thrilled that we had a presence there. It's something we have not done for as many years as I've been around. So I think that it's just one more way for the community to know who the leadership team is and to demonstrate our commitment to this community. So thank you for giving up your 4th of July morning to do that. And
was fun.
also you guys at the end of the table. So it was actually fun.
It
right?
was fun.
Was it fun?
It was.
It was.
Come on,
For the
Paul, was it
record,
fun?
for the record, I have to say, for the record, I still had plenty of candy.
Somebody's a professional.
He's an accountant. He knows how to ration.
Right.
He gave one piece to the poor children. We gave
We
4.
were scattering and
We were throwing it.
We were
Mr. Kalinowski and I were at Kroger that morning. We should have bought stock in M&M Mars.
Mr. Sawyer,
I got a couple more, but
please.
I had a question from a member of the community asking when our new athletic director is going to be here on campus and starting his job.
He's official August 1st.
August 1st.
Dr. Troyer and I have a meeting with him with Mr. Carter tomorrow. So
good.
he's actually moved to Ohio from Colorado. So I know his moving truck is in town. He's currently in the process of unloading that and putting everything away, but he is coming to the school district tomorrow. But he's official on August 1st.
Perfect. And I'm sure he will address the practice field schedules soon after his arrival.
There's many things on the list.
Okay. And then the last thing I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, because this was also an important follow-up to the announcement of the grant that Dr. Domini talked about at her last meeting last time, was that, would you talk a little bit about the transition meeting for the solar house as well?
That actually was not on my list, but we did meet with Corner-Kokosing and the partners related to the solar house to talk about the construction schedule and the planning and the assistance the school district will receive. It's approximately $261,000 that'll be received from the State Department of Education through the Straight A grant that Dr. Domini spoke about. We did have a successful meeting. Corner-Kokosing is the construction manager for the project. They're working on putting together a construction schedule. We would anticipate that when it officially begins, it's plus or minus 6 months to go through the entire process, from permitting to actual physically getting to occupancy for phase 1. And that's basically drying it in and making sure that ultimately it's accessible. Then there's a phase 2, a phase 3, and a phase 4 that ultimately may require future funding down the road, depending on all the things that it becomes. But we've had successful transition with Dr. Domini before she left. Mr. Triplett was also at the meeting. We thanked him for his participation, Mr. Rush clearly, and Corner-Kokosing was there as well.
Thank you.
So with the money that we currently have, will we have a completed functioning facility?
Yes, for phase 1, phase 2. I don't know that it'll do everything that's visioned for the facility of the future for phase 3 and 4, but yes, it will be occupiable and usable after phase 1 and phase 2, which is dominantly the first part of the grant. And then Mr. Rush was successful in raising approximately $135,000 prior to this that also will contribute to that overall scope. So as soon as I get additional information back from Corna, this was just a planning meeting for transition. So as soon as I get some additional information, I'll be happy to share that. I guess I should ask because I don't know. Did Dr. Domini actually give you a copy of the grant? I don't know. Do you want the grant? I can give it to you. We'll send it to you. I apologize. I didn't know you didn't have it. So we have the grant. I will send it to you so you can see exactly what it does for phase 1, phase 2.
And what about ongoing cost of operations after it's constructed?
It's part of the grant in kind that would be contributed by the school district, has to be built into the curriculum budget for building budgets moving forward out of the general fund. So that was the in-kind contribution that's built into the actual grant.
Would you be sure that we have a detail of that ongoing annual expense, please?
Yes.
I'm finished. Would you?
My only comment is I appreciate you reporting out on your 100-day plan with specifics on specific tasks you plan to do during the 100 days. And I also appreciate that your presentation is 6 slides, including the cover page. Very excited about that.
The next one's not.
I'm glad I got the thanks out of the way this time.
Next one's more complicated. I'm sorry.
Mr. Stories, one quick one on the mental health programming. Do you have a team internally that executes on whatever you agree to with?
Dr. Troyer, building principals and the guidance counselors, working with the mental health specialists within the school district with the third-party connections that we have with the interagency agreements.
So you have representation from each school? Thanks.
Yes. Other questions? Patrick, we're going to transition to transportation. Mrs. Honecker, you're welcome to join me for the fun as you want to participate in this wonderful conversation. Welcome. So as I indicated during the 100-day plan conversation, Mrs. Honecker and I have been actively looking at transportation for 2016-17 school year. So before we actually get into the presentation, the number one question we're receiving repeatedly through email and or through phone is when will we know the bus routes for 2016-17? So pursuant to the negotiated agreement with OPSI, the collective bargaining agreement for bus drivers, we have to go to bid the first week in August. So the bid date for bus routes by bus drivers is scheduled for Wednesday, August 3rd. Presuming that the bid proceeds as planned and it is over in 24 hours or less, which it typically is, then we plan to publish bus routes for the 2016-17 school year on Friday, August 5th. So that's the magic date, presuming that the bid goes as planned by contract. So on or about Friday the 5th or the following Monday, one of those two, depending on how this all comes together, we will publish bus routes for 2016-17. Families that are eligible for school bus transportation will receive direct communication from Mrs. Honecker, giving them the bus information, the bus stop, the bus time, the bus location, and everything that the parent would need to know to be successful to understand what's happening for school bus transportation for 16-17. So this evening, we want to talk about really the nuts and bolts of transportation and actually get into very specific information related to student ridership and numbers and an opportunity that actually exists for the school district based upon a change that is required to meet the needs of middle school and high school students and how it ultimately may benefit students enrolled in grades kindergarten through 5th grade. So I'm going to start, we're going to kind of like do a little history lesson to make sure everybody has context before we get into actual nuts and bolts of numbers. So if you recall, in May of 2015, we modified school policy related to bus transportation to mirror the stipulations or requirements of Ohio Revised Code. And specifically, within the code, the Board of Education adopted that children living beyond the 2-mile walking distance shall be entitled to bus transportation, except any such student that is issued a valid parking permit will not be eligible for bus transportation as long as he or she possesses the valid student parking permit. Exceptions to the foregoing limits may be made in the case of a temporarily or permanently disabled child who has been so certified by a physician in the case of adverse safety conditions. That's Board of Education policy today within the school district. So in essence, what that means is there's a 2-mile rule in place pursuant to Ohio Revised Code and the promulgated rules by the Ohio Department of Education that talk about how you become eligible for school bus transportation. When you boil that down very simplistically, we have 2 measures to equal transportation in the school district. The first is from a student's home to the K-1 building if he or she is enrolled in the kindergarten or 1st grade at the K-1 elementary school. So your first measure is from your house to the K-1 on the road that is most traversable, logical path to go from your house to the K-1 elementary school. And there's a physical distance measurement that takes place. The second measurement option is from your house to the 2-8 learning facility centralized bus loop. Last year, and you may remember this was a change for the last school year, when we opened the new building, and it became an established school under Ohio Revised Code and was issued the IRN by the Ohio Department of Education, it became the centralized bus loop for grades 2 through 12. Therefore, all students are measured to the centralized bus loop at the front door of the 2-8 learning facility. I don't know what that is. We'll ignore it. It's not the fire alarm. I think it's a,
Read on.
I don't know. So the measurement goes to the 2-8 learning facility. Now, because of that, and we've talked about this previously, the distance from Cardulas Way as you wind around the road to come into the new building counts in favor of the students for the measurement. It's actually 0.54. It's over half a mile from the entrance of Cardulas Way to the front door. So your 2-mile rule in the school district is really 1.46 because the 0.54 is a given for anyone in grades 2 through 12 that gets dropped off at the front door of the 2-8 learning facility. That's current practice in the school district, which mirrors the requirement under Ohio Revised Code. There are 2 exceptions. The first is exception number 1 for K through 5 students. Because we currently bus all students enrolled in grades K through 5 on the same bus routes, it is physically possible that within a household, a student may be eligible at the K1, but his sibling or her sibling is ineligible at the 2-5 because the distance to the K1 does not equal the distance to the 2-12 or the K through 12 learning facility for the 2-8 building. So it's physically possible one child could be eligible and another child would be ineligible. In any house where there are multiple siblings and one child is eligible but the other is not, we made both eligible. So you're eligible by exception. The second choice is an outlier. There are certain neighborhoods within the school district that ended up having 2 or 3 students geographically that were not going to be eligible for transportation, but everyone surrounding them was, based upon how the measurement occurred. If they were an outlier, and there's approximately 75 students district-wide that we would say are an outlier on a map, we made them eligible so they would not be the only 2 or 3 kids in a specific neighborhood not getting transportation when the bus is coming in to get everyone else but them. This past year, there were 25 in-town eligible routes for kindergarten through 5th grade. We had 3 out-of-district routes for K through 5 students. If you recall, under Ohio Revised Code, if it's 30 minutes or less, we're required to provide transportation unless we can deem it impractical to do so. We have elementary bus routes to go to St. Charles and Columbus School for Girls, Columbus Academy, and then we have 1 route that does DeSales, Marburn, and St. Matthews combined. So there are 3 out-of-district elementary routes for K-5. We have special needs transportation pursuant to IEP requirements that are required by law. We provide midday for kindergarten and pre-K geographically. And based upon all of that, when you boil it down, last year at the end of the school year, we had about 200 students in grades K through 5 that were ineligible for school bus transportation. And that's because of the eligible by exception. So when these 200, they don't have a sibling, they're less than 2 miles, they just do not qualify under any other means. Other students, over 300, became eligible by exception because they have a sibling in their home that permitted them to get transportation, but the other student did not. The secondary level, we had 25 in-town eligible routes. Again, there's no exception. It's just a 2-mile rule for students at the middle school and high school level. We had 4 out-of-district routes, St. Charles and Columbus School for Girls, Columbus Academy, and DeSales, Marburn, and St. Matthews remained. At the secondary level, we also have Eastland Fairfield, the Career Technical Education Center, where some of our students to attend for high school purposes. Special needs continues, and at the end of the school year, we had approximately 600 middle school and high school students that were ineligible for school bus transportation. Again, they live less than 2 miles from school. And truth be told, it's less than 1.46 because of Cardulas Way. I know this chart is small. There were handouts at the door for audience members. This is also in your packet, so you actually can see it for purposes. We've taken all of the student data from last year and actually broken it down into grade level to actually show you the number of students in 2015-16 that were eligible or eligible by exception at the K through 5 level and writing. and then also showed you the secondary numbers for grades 6 through 12. Again, if you recall, we transport first in the morning all middle school, high school students in grades 6 through 12, and then the second run of the morning is ultimately students in grades K through 5. There is a midday drop for ultimately pickup. Half-day kindergarten students do have midday as well. So we showed you enrollment numbers that we ended the school year with. So you can see for total pre-K-5 population, we had 1,137 elementary students that were eligible and did participate in transportation last year. We had 992 students that actually rode at the secondary level for grades 6 through 12. Then we've taken those exact numbers and forecast them out through the life of the 5-year forecast through 2019-20. For kindergarten, we've just put in a placeholder of 200 students. On our typical average day, elementaries run at 90%. So the average daily ridership for elementary students is 90% of all students eligible ride the bus. At the secondary level for grades 6 through 12, approximately 80% ride every day that are eligible. So there's a lower, 10% lower ridership generally that we have observed at the secondary level over the elementary level. 90% typically ride at elementary, 80% typically ride at the secondary level. So 200 was put in as a placeholder related to kindergarten. And so if you look at the first year for 16-17, and then you can see how basically the class moves throughout the years as you basically move them from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade. When you actually follow the chart, we've included new enrollment impact of 50 kids per level just to constitute 100 new students coming to the school district, which is typically what the projection indicates. And you will see that in 2016-17, the elementary goes from 1137 to 1196 for an increase of 59 students. However, and this is why this presentation is happening tonight, because I need to explain to you what we're doing. When you take last year's 5th grade group, which was a bubble group in the school district, the current 6th grade class for 2016-17 is the largest class in the school district. So the bubble group is moving from 5th grade elementary to 6th grade. When you move them to 6th grade and you only take out 24 or 24 seniors that actually did ride the bus, and you see there's a significant drop off in 11th and 12th grade because we have parking permits. If you have a parking permit, you cannot be eligible to ride the bus. So there are actually 24 seniors that graduate that we take out, and I've moved the 5th graders with Mrs. Honecker to 6th grade. You see we have a projection of 1,132, or we're increasing 140 students for middle school, high school buses. The current middle school, high school buses are at capacity and some are overcrowded. It's physically not possible to transport 140 more middle school, high school kids in our school district without adding bus routes. So Mrs. Honecker and I have spent weeks going through to try to figure out what's the most cost-effective, efficient way we can actually increase the number of routes in the school district to still meet student demands for the kids that remain eligible for transportation. So tonight, we're going to share with you that we're projecting for 2016-17 that really K through 5 stays the same. We still need 25 bus routes minimally for elementary to transport the number of kids. That includes 3 kids per seat, dominantly in grades K through 3. I know I've gotten phone calls, Mrs. Honecker's gotten phone calls, and some board members have received phone calls over the fact that there could be 3 kids in a seat. That's our new reality in the school district. We did cut 10 buses out of the fleet. There is an impact when we did the budget reduction related to transportation in the fleet itself. So there are times, and dominantly kindergarten through 2nd, but sometimes 3rd grade on some bus routes that it requires 3 kids per seat. It's just a standard that people should expect, that if you're eligible for transportation, you should expect 3 per seat as an efficient use of our resource. You still get a ride, but it means there's 3 kids per seat for grades K through 2 and sometimes 3, depending on the route, correct? For middle school, high school, because of the 140 kids that ultimately will probably be eligible, well, they are eligible to ride, we have to change the number of bus routes that have become available for students. So I'm forecasting with Mrs. Honecker that we have to go from 25 in town to 28. There's 3 additional routes that are necessary for the 2016-17 school year. Those positions will be included within the forecast of the 5-year forecast for positions that are accounted for. We've already accounted for them as part of the classified staffing level. The out-of-town school districts will remain at 4. However, we are going to reconfigure them based upon current student numbers because we're picking up St. Paul's. Columbus Academy will now be joined by St. Matthew's students, and DeSales Marburn will now be joined with St. Paul's. St. Paul's was not transported during the 2015-16 school year. It was not practical to transport based upon the number of students. However, based upon the number of students now enrolled at St. Paul's, we cannot rule it ineligible. So St. Paul's and Westerville will receive transportation beginning with the 2016-17 school year. It will join the bus route with DeSales and Marburn.
Mr. Sawyers, is that new, the addition of St. Paul's? I thought last meeting we approved.
This upcoming school year will be new.
So the approvals we made last board meeting.
That was for payment in lieu of for last school year.
Last school year, okay, thank you.
Correct. So there still will be approximately 600 students at the middle school, high school level that still will not qualify for transportation. The number fluctuates. We're somewhere between 6 and 625, but approximately 600 kids will remain ineligible at the secondary level for transportation. So why am I telling you all of this? I know you're saying, so what? Why do we need to know this? Well, part of it's staffing, that we actually have these positions built in the forecast, and we're actually providing the services that you've actually dictated through your policy to meet the needs of kids. However, based upon the analysis that Mrs. Honaker and I did, we do have to have 3 more bus routes for middle school, high school due to the changes for students that are eligible to transport and the overcrowding that's existed. And I know you got phone calls over trying to put 3 middle school kids into a seat. And some routes had to be manipulated to balance routes. And we made it clear to our families, although some soon forget, that routes remain subject to change based upon enrollment changes. I can't predict what's going to happen in a specific area of the school district. We try to build in the buffer to allow for fluctuation, but in some areas it's just physically impossible, which means streets have to be moved, which means kids move a bus and may not be riding with the same friends that they were riding with to begin with. That then generates the phone call. Mrs. Honaker and I have determined that one route can be achieved through routing reconfiguration. So we're actually shifting streets district-wide, taking one street off of this route, adding another street to this route, adding 2 streets to this route, and actually moving the entire fleet across the entire school district boundaries. That will actually achieve the addition of one of the 3 routes. So we actually will do that through efficiency of the routing system. We had 2 routes in particular that continued to lose ridership throughout the spring, just based upon changes that were occurring within specific developments, and do not forecast, based upon current student populations in those areas, that they needed to stay the same. So we've shifted streets. So the first news piece that I will tell you that you can expect if you're a parent watching the video and you get your letter because you're eligible on August 5th or 8th when the letters go out to tell you bus transportation assignments, all bus routes look different for 2016-17. There's something that's changed on every single route district-wide. So we did that to achieve the efficiency of 1 FTE. So it was possible that we don't have to hire one of the 3 positions by doing that. However, with the 3 additional routes, we still have to hire 2 bus drivers, and the 1 will be done through reassignment. So let's look at the math, because this is part of the opportunity that comes to the board tonight with a recommendation from Mrs. Honaker and myself. A 3-hour bus driver that only drives middle school, high school is permissible now by contract. We no longer, pursuant to the negotiated agreement that we negotiated in the last round of negotiations, have to hire a bus driver for a minimum of 5 hours. We have the ability to hire for a minimum of 2.5 plus pre-trip, post-trip to equal 3 hours. So 3 hours is the new minimum. If we hire a bus driver for middle school, high school at 3 hours of step 0, when you take their salary, their Medicare, the board paid retirement required by law, and total that, it's $12,020.01 is what a 3-hour bus driver will cost. A 5-hour bus driver in the school district drives both middle school, high school, and kindergarten through 5th grade, drives both routes. Not one, but both, AM and PM. And again, take the salary plus the Medicare plus the board paid retirement required by law. The total cost for a 5-hour bus driver at step 0 is $20,033.35. The difference between a 3-hour middle school, high school only driver and a 5-hour middle school, high school K-5 driver is about $8,000. So to hire the person to do both routes costs about $8,000 more. Because of what we have for next year, we need 3 new middle school, high school routes. There's approximately 200 kindergarten through 5th grade students who remain ineligible for transportation in today's world that will continue into next year because they do not qualify for the exception. They do not have a brother or sister that goes to the opposite building, so therefore they are ineligible. If we maximize our district resources for 16-17 and choose to hire the 2 5-hour bus drivers, Mrs. Honaker and I believe it's physically possible that all students in grades K through 5 can receive transportation for approximately $16,000 more annually. Now, I know you're going to say, well, that's great for next year. What happens in the future? Can we sustain it? We've looked at the projections for enrollment throughout the course of the 5-year forecast and basically have determined that it can be sustained. And over the life of the 5-year forecast, $16,000 approximate per year times the 5 years is $80,000 for the cost during the term of the 5-year forecast. So for approximately $80,000, if it is understood that it could be sustainable if the current student grade level configurations writing together continue as they are today. So if today's rules stay the same, it works for the future. If students in grades K-3 are likely to ride 3 students per seat, that has to be understood. And if all students in grades K through 5 are transported, the goal is to keep 4th and 5th graders 2 per seat based due to size when possible. So again, there are still some routes in the school district, and that was this past year at the end of the school year, that we had some issues with 4th graders, but it was because of kids that moved in and kids that moved out. And the sizes aren't all the same. So a kindergartner looks dramatically different. You can imagine a 5th grader looks dramatically different. We have all shapes and sizes, big, tall, small. They're very, very different. So we have to understand that in some cases, although generally we're saying kindergarten through 3 will be 3 per seat, it could happen that it could be a 4th or 5th grader with a smaller child. Students will continue to only be transported to their home residence. I am not recommending, if we consider this for 16-17, that we bring back the infamous, I'm just going to call it the bus pass. The school district used to accommodate every parent request to let Susie go to Billy's house for his birthday party. We used to drop off at dance lessons as long as it was in New Albany. We used to go anywhere that you can imagine through the issuance of a bus pass. I am not under any way, shape, or form recommending that return. This is just to the primary residence. That's it. The current daycare transportation has to remain the same. Daycares have actually instituted programs where they're now transporting the students from the daycare as a service to the parent as part of their service. Cluster bus stops are now going to be implemented district-wide. That's happening regardless of any ultimately ability to enhance K through 5. Mrs. Honaker and I have gone through the maps and we've actually moved bus stops. Students are permitted under Ohio Revised Code to walk up to 1/2 mile. Last school year, the furthest distance was 0.42. No one walked to 1/2 mile, but some thought that they did. But there was no one that walked to 1/2 mile to the bus stop, but it is permissible by law. Bus stops are changing regardless because it's part of the efficiency of moving streets. Bus routes will be different. I've said that multiple times, but we know we're going to get phone calls on it. This is not the same bus stop my kid had last year. This is a different place. And the answer is yes. Bus stops will be different for 2016-17. Bus routes will be different for 2016-17. And no changes must occur for middle school, high school. It's physically impossible, and although I'm recommending this evening with Mrs. Honaker a solution to benefit kindergarten through 5th graders, our youngest students in the school district, I physically don't have a solution that can benefit middle school, high school that doesn't cost significant for the school district for the long term. So our recommendation this evening to you in preparation for July 25th, on the July 25th board agenda, you will actually have an action item to approve bus routes for 2016-17 as required by law. So in that recommendation, I plan to bring forward, depending on your conversation this evening, a recommendation that all students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade become eligible for transportation for 2016-17. It will require us hiring 2 5-hour bus drivers instead of 2 3-hour bus drivers that we must have for middle school, high school. The anticipated cost is $16,000 annually. It allows plus or minus 200 K through 5 students to become eligible for transportation, and quite honestly, will eliminate more than $16,000 of phone calls and emails and tracking and measuring that we do to try to figure out if the student is or isn't really eligible and why he or she really is not eligible when there's an appeal that happens. And I know what those emails look like. Mrs. Honecker knows what those emails look like. The phone logs are tremendous. I know you've received phone calls in the past. So for $16,000, I strongly recommend that we consider, and I believe I will find $16,000 in the 5-year forecast annually to benefit the K through 5 students. Middle school, high school must be maintained with the 2-mile rule because of the number of students that are ineligible. What questions or discussion would you like to have? Mrs. Kalinowski?
So the only grade that we see that is this anomaly is 5th going into 6th.
For the next 4 years, yes.
Okay. So you don't anticipate our equations getting messed up?
No, we believe that we can maintain for the life of the 5-year forecast 28 buses that will be necessary for middle school, high school. Now, again, I don't have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen with enrollment. We've used the enrollment projection numbers. I've used the low because that's been the track record the last 2 years. Dr. Domini routinely used the moderate, but the numbers just don't justify it in the last 2 years. So I've been using the low data, and that's what we've done for the analysis. But I believe through the life of the forecast, it's possible to do it with our 28. Now, to prepare for the worst case, because that's part of our responsibility, I will remind you that in the life of the forecast each year, there are 5 classified positions built in that when justified, we would use them. So if necessary, one of my 5 positions could become a bus driver if we determine enrollment changes. So there is something built in as a safeguard, but again, it would be through the justification process. I would have to have enrollment to justify the need to add a bus driver.
And are there any grades above that 6th grade group that are particularly large that when they graduate, it would alleviate some seating? Sorry.
It's in my bag. I could put sorry. The current sophomore class has 400 kids in it. Now, granted, they're at the high school level, and when you look at your chart, we only have 168 kids that are projected in the fall that will become eligible. So of the 400, only 168 of them are eligible for transportation because of the 2-mile rule.
So that's not going to be significant.
The 5th grade group this year for 2016-17 has 360 kids in it. It's actually one of the larger classes. The actual smallest class is the incoming kindergarten class. Most of the classes range from 345 to 400, with the exception of the current incoming 6th grade class and the incoming 7th grade class. They have 424 and 417 respectively. So the bubble group has moved 2 years in a row. The largest classes in this district are at the middle school.
Mr. Sawyer, as you mentioned, some of the challenges with multiple kids in a seat, 0.42 miles or so to go to a bus stop, but I don't hear that that's going to get worse with this proposal. It may only get better. So is there any downside from your perspective besides the $16,000 annual cost to bringing back busing for the entire K-5?
The only one that I can think of is any negative residual that comes from the parent that has a middle school or high school student that we just do not have a solution for. Without adding 5 to 7 more routes, which we cut during the budget reduction process, I can't transport another 600 kids at the secondary level. They just don't fit 3 to a seat. When you maximize the bus routes, the day of the bus running half empty, and historically, I will be honest and tell you that's something that did happen in New Albany. with all the different conveniences that were available to parents. That's changed. That is not our new normal. The daily phone call that she gets in transportation, either directly to Mrs. Honecker, the secretary, and then it comes to me, Dr. Troyer, or a variety of other administrators, is that my kid had 3 people in the seat today. They have a book bag, they brought the tuba, they brought the clarinet, you name it, and all that's there, and that's an extra body. So it's just part of the reality. The only downside I see is I do not have a solution for middle school, high school. I think it's a great benefit for K through 5. I think our parents will well receive it. I'm confident the $16,000 expenditure can be covered within the 5-year forecast annually. I will find $16,000 to make the differential in the budget for what it actually does for kids. And to me, that's the inherent benefit. These are the youngest students in the school district. If anyone, and it's not that I'm anti-walking, we are a walking community. I think it's wonderful for kids to be able to walk. I actually would expect the parents will still have some that will opt out. This is available. Now you tell us if you choose to use it. I actually do believe there will be parents that opt out. Questions, reactions?
Anything else?
I'll just indicate my reaction. I think you mentioned you want to take this to vote on the 25th. I am on a vacation that week, and I just want to express my full support for this. I appreciate the hard work and the effort going into looking for ways to be creative. I think it makes sense from a safety perspective to bring back the K-5. I hope that that won't be viewed negatively by the community, that we can't do it all at once, but I think it's really incremental progress. It's ways to be more efficient with our dollars and provide the same transport. I've got 3rd graders. I'll let them know they're going to be 3 to a seat. And I hope the rest of the board will consider voting for this next meeting.
I have one question. Of the 10 routes that we cut through the reductions, how many in total will we have restored if we adopt this recommendation?
It's going to be 4 of the 10.
4
If
of
we do these 3. And I think there was one other one that we added.
We brought one back through the elimination of outsourcing of transportation for a student with special needs, because historically we've contracted with TriStar when necessary, depending on the student's IEP, and the 3rd-party contract with TriStar is $17,000 per child.
Which we're hoping not to use it all next year.
We are looking for the most efficient and effective fleet possible. So we have done due diligence to try to find creative solutions, even to the point, and I know it's an inconvenience for some families, and you get territorial, there's no other word to describe it, that Susie likes to ride with Johnny or Susie likes to ride with Mary. They're 1 street apart and they're going to go 2 different bus stops. That's necessary to balance the routes. So I understand that they may not be with their best friend, but I can't fix that and transport the number of students that we have to on a daily basis in an efficient and effective manner.
Well, I would like to echo Paul's comments. I really appreciate the work that went into this very carefully considered recommendation. You know, I think that we have been very, very cautious about adding back things that we took out through the reduction plan. But to me, for $16,000 a year, that's a good investment in the safety of our littlest people. And even with the potential of 3 to a seat and Susie and Tommy not riding the bus they want to ride and all those other things that you've made very, very clear. And I hope people will remember that that's all of these caveats are part of the recommendation. But I personally think from a safety standpoint, I'm going to sleep a whole lot better knowing that we don't have little ones walking to school in the dark. So thank you for finding a way to add to the safety, which is our job 1, really. They can't learn if they're not safe, right?
Sure.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Honecker.
And thank you for that. And we are at public participation. Patrick, did anyone sign up to speak this evening? Okay, well, that takes us into our consent agenda items. I was actually going to, we have no treasurer's items this evening, so I was going to take the board items and the superintendent items for action in one motion if I could. And then I think that Mr. Darrow probably has something to say about the board action item, and we'll ask Mr. Sawyer to comment as he wishes on the other items. So I would be interested, please, in a motion to approve items A1 through B3B as in boy.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
McClellan. Thank you, Mr. Darrow. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and Mr. Darrow, would you like to speak about
Sure.
the results of your search to?
Sure. We posted on the district website for any folks in the community who were interested in joining the board insurance committee. And after that public posting and speaking with a number of individuals, I'm pleased and excited to start the process with 4 individuals listed here who are members of the community, who work in the district, live in the district, and have knowledge and experience of health insurance products and processes and what's out there. So I'm excited to get to work with these folks. We have J.R. Pine here this evening representing the group, and I'm thrilled to see J.R. here. J.R.'s been in insurance and health insurance for 25 years, as I remember from our conversation, and the other 3 members also have experience in one way or another in the process. And so it's a nice cross-section of folks in the community. I think there's a wonderful opportunity for the board to learn from what these folks can teach us about what's available out there. I'm looking forward to their advice as to what we can learn and see what we can do to provide the security that our employees expect and demand, and at the same time use our resources as wisely as possible and put the money into kids. So
Great.
Excited to move forward.
Sounds great. That seems to be the theme of the evening, is looking for ways to continue to be very efficient with our resources so that money can be directed back towards kids.
In accordance with our statement of purpose.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, that's great. And then just so that members of the public know, because this is a committee of the board, we will, and you will be following all of the rules associated with open meetings and posting meeting notices and making your agenda public and keeping minutes as well, so that those of us who are not going to be at the meetings can see what's going on.
indeed.
Thanks. Okay.
JR, did you want to say anything to say hello? Or
I will say hello, and again, it's a privilege to serve on this committee. Looking forward to getting started, and hopefully we can be helpful and make a difference.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Sawyers.
The superintendent items for action this evening are
Could I just,
standard.
I apologize,
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Sawyers, didn't interrupt. I know we have Kate Toma here, who we just approved as a new assistant principal.
You haven't
so I
approved her
just-
yet. I'm going to talk about her.
Gosh.
we approved the agenda item. We haven't actually voted.
Here we're on such a positive.
So we have standard agenda items this evening. There's one in particular that I'm going to highlight. It's 1D. And it is the approval of my recommendation to hire Kate Toma as the elementary assistant principal for grades 2 through 5 at the 2-8 learning facility. We're super excited that Mrs. Toma has accepted the opportunity to join the leadership team as an administrator within the school district. She's an experienced veteran teacher within the school district. She served as intervention specialist in 4th grade. She served as a 3rd grade teacher. She served as a tech coach for Ultimately Teachers. She's very active in professional development and learning on an ongoing basis, both with adults and with kids. She's extraordinary as a classroom teacher, and we're looking forward to bringing her into the leadership team as an assistant principal to join Katie Nowak, the new principal at the 2-8 Learning Facility. So tonight you do have a recommendation, Mr. Newmoff, for approval to vote on Mrs. Toma as a new elementary assistant principal. Beyond that, all the other agenda items are standard. There is one business item at the end for a tech purchase. It's part of the technology replacement plan that Mr. Voss has been actively implementing. So you've had several technology things in the last several meetings. Mr. Voss is doing his due diligence to march through, helping us to replace antiquated end-of-life equipment to the best of his ability, using our budgetary resources to their maximum. So Mr. Voss has done a wonderful job with that. But there is an agenda item this evening for additional technology purchase for 2016-17. I just showed you how sensitive these are. I apologize for moving the piece of paper over the microphone. Mr. Voss, I didn't take your warning. I apologize. With that, everything else on the agenda is standard that you would see on a routine basis for replacement hires. Dr. Troyer has been very busy in trying to fill replacement positions for persons that are resigning from the school district, but we are on target and almost entirely staffed. We have one vacancy.
We actually have 2 part-time vacancies we're working on, part-time elementary physical education and part-time elementary music.
So we are in the home stretch.
Very good. Any questions? Okay, now, Mr. Newmoff.
I will only say at the last meeting, I had a regret that I didn't jump in and thank Bill Resch, who gave a presentation, and obviously we got the grant award. And so with that in mind, I wanted to make sure we didn't miss out on that, recognizing Kate in your meeting. But absolutely, yes.
Okay, we'll count that as.
Yeah, we still haven't called for the vote. You know, that.
I think we can though, right? Is everybody else satisfied?
Please take me out of my misery.
We may have to get a rope and tie you to your chair here. So could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Vice President McClellan,
Yes.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Mrs. Kalinowski.
Yes.
And Mr. Newmoff.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And President Kohler.
Yes, and that motion carries. So we have one more opportunity for public participation. And we have no speakers this evening. So I would like to make a motion, and we'll be asking for a second, please, to enter into executive session at whatever time it is when we walk out of the room.
7:40.
7:40, as permitted by section 121.22 G1 and 4 of the Ohio Revised Code for the consideration of the evaluation and compensation of a public employee. So I've made the motion. Could we have a second, please?
Second.
Okay. And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. President Kohler,
Yes.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Mrs. Kalinowski.
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Vice President McClelland.
Yes.
Okay. Again, that motion carries, and I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Kalinowski.
You can adjourn until you're out of executive session.
Oh, I can't adjourn
You have to
until I'm
wait.
out of executive session. Oh,
There's no business being conducted after executive session, is that correct?
that is correct, Mr. Sawyers.
So you'll
Okay,
adjourn. from
we're
executive
adjour-
session.
yes.
You're going to the
Okay.
tech conference